Nice to meet you. My colleague is Anders. Yesterday. It was a direct flight to Geneva, which for us is a real luxury because usually when you fly it's complicated, particularly when you fly to the top. Exactly. Airlines make use of the fact that you can fly, land at these airports and take off at the very end and at least of hours, which is what it takes. Which is what you've done.
Во что это вырвется? То есть все ограничения. Все уже. Да. 207 миллионов. Lansare cursul de proiectului мы все приходим сейчас. Потом включается ну и вот, скажем, я беседую с коллегой из технического университета. Зачем мне надо наш проект? Тогда я буду подавать лично.
Stimate doamne secretară de stat, excelențe dumneavoastră, stimate domnul Nelson, stimați invitați, avem onoarea astăzi să lansăm Studiul regional pentru politici de inovare în parteneriat cu UNECE și în acest scop va avea loc orele politicilor, dar și a instituțiilor implicate în sectorul inovațional. Cu acest prilej, doamna Belei, secretar de stat pentru cercetare și învățământ superior de cadrul Ministerului Educației, Culturii și Cercetării, va deschide evenimentul și ne vom ura succes pentru acest exercițiu care pentru noi este unul nou și vă dăm și pentru dumneavoastră. Doamna secretar de stat, vă rog.
Bună ziua, excelență doamna ambasador, dragi colegi invitați. Suntem bucuroși că ați acceptat cu multă promptitudine inițiativa preluată din mers de către Ministerul Educației, Culturii și Cercetării privind implicarea în lansarea și finalizarea unui studiu subregional sub egida Comitetului pentru Economie din cadrul Organizației Națiunilor Unite pentru Europa. În acest context, se pliază extrem de bine această inițiativă, ocazie pentru care mulțumim și inițiatorilor și Republica Moldova își reiterează intenția de a nu fi excluse din rândurile statelor care sunt parte a acestui studiu subregional. Este vorba de politici inovaționale, inovații în general. Spuneam că ne plem destul de bine și suntem și surprinși și bucuroși că, dincolo de Institutul Național pentru Cercetări Economice, care a fost pionier în a comunica pe această filieră, s-a ajuns finalmente la Minister, autoritate publică centrală responsabilă de politicile naționale în domeniul cercetării și inovării. În acest context, nu ezit să menționez și să apreciez eforturile Guvernului Republicii Moldova, care, la 1 august 2019, a acceptat ambițiosul plan național, program național de cercetare și inovare cu planul său de implementare, adoptând în acest sens și o metodologie de finanțare a concursului național de proiecte pentru cercetare și inovare. Sunt sigur că avem în sală, n-am reușit să fac tur de tablă, reprezentanții ai ANCD-ului, o altă autoritate națională centrală, responsabilă de implementarea politicilor, autoritate în privința căreia ne punem mari speranță că este nu doar full operated, dar și în stare să-și ducă misiunea pentru care a fost creată la bun sfârșit. Mizăm enorm de acest lucru și nu doar în procesul de concurs național pentru programe de stat, dar și pentru proiectele de transfer tehnologic, atribuții pe care a revenit ANCD-ului urmarea reformei. Nu în ultimul rând, mizăm pe implicarea tuturor institutelor de cercetare, indiferent de fondatorul acestora, și a universităților care au capacități să dezvolte proiecte de cercetare inovaționale în special. Ori inovație înseamnă nou, iar nou înseamnă tânăr, fără a face vreo aluzie la careva maniere de discriminare. Din acest considerent, și Academia de Științe, în formatul actual, în formula actuală, hai să zicem, de for național strategic și consultant al Guvernului pe probleme de cercetare și inovare, va fi implicată în măsură deplină în colectarea de date, în exprimarea în indicatori cuantificabili a situației reale, ori până în 2017, până când această dureroasă, controversată, dar sper efectivă reformă în domeniul cercetării și inovării, preocuparea pentru politicile naționale în domeniul inovării revenea și Academiei de Științe a Moldovei. Am cunoscut colegii noștri experți care au venit astăzi să ne ajute să înțelegem care este misiunea și să discutăm în termeni restrânși, foarte pragmatic, cine, ce trebuie să facă, astfel ca în vara anului 2020, Republica Moldova, alături de alte state din Europa de Est, Ucraina, Belarus și statele din regiunea caucaziană, Azerbaijan, Georgia și sper Armenia, să figureze, poate, cu o situație cât mai realistică în acest studiu subregional. Și ne dorim acest lucru nu pentru că nu am înțelege unde suntem, ce avem și ce ne dorim. Ne dorim acest lucru pentru că așteptăm și propuneri, sugestii fezabile pentru a putea îmbunătăți situația. Și cercetarea și inovarea sunt în afara politicii, mă refer la politică, nu politici, ca și strategii, și cercetarea și inovarea sunt în afara frontierilor. Acest exercițiu de astăzi este o dovadă elocventă în acest sens. Vă mulțumesc pentru prezență, mizez pe implicarea dumneavoastră și rezultatele acestei comunicări, acestui atelier pe care Ministerul găzduiește astăzi, vor fi formulate niște concluzii pe care sperăm să le respectăm cu bună credință, toți cei implicați. Vă mulțumesc și vă doresc succes!
În continuare vom oferi cuvântul excelenței sale, ambasadorul Studiului Republica Moldova, doamnei Untitled. Mulțumesc!
Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. I'm very happy to be here for these very important discussions. State Secretary, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by saying that this year, when we are celebrating the 10th year of the Eastern Partnership, we are extra happy to see a special support dedicated to innovation and to competitiveness policies that includes all the 6 Eastern Partnership countries. And we also see a project where countries involved can benefit from additional expertise, expertise that also could be further used for improvement of the national procedures and methodologies. When we look at the Swedish development cooperation to Moldova and to the other Eastern Partnership countries, it is governed by a strategy that aims at supporting EU integration with the ambition to strengthen the ties between the European Union and the partner countries. And this includes areas such as democratization, it's modernization, it is about fight against poverty and support for human rights. And in line with this aim, we have a clear focus on reforms concentrated into 3 areas that we see as crucial for the long-term EU integration. All these areas, we can also see that they can be accelerated by an innovative approach and joint effort between public and private institutions. These 3 areas that we focus on is enhanced economic integration with the European Union, is the development of a market economy, it's strengthened democracy, greater respect for human rights and more fully developed state under the rule of law, and it's a better environment, reduced climate change and enhanced resilience to environmental impact and climate change. And in all these 3 areas, progress and the implemented reforms, they can facilitate continued integration with the EU and also improve the life quality of ordinary citizens in these partnership countries and Moldova. And the fact that the project that we are talking about today is a regional project and not a bilateral one would in my view add extra benefits to the overall process, because when we are talking about innovation and innovative approaches, we also talk very much about the impact of intersectionality of cooperation, and we share common tools and experience, sharing experiences. And I think this is also especially relevant considering that we have countries in the same region sharing similar challenges. We can follow this principle also in many EU cross-border programs where we see priorities such as good governance and innovation, research and innovation. So this comes very well together, and we see how multiplier effects can be achieved here. With this report dedicated to response to countries, the request for assistance to improve innovation policies, we will provide targeted advisory missions, trainings, workshops, and other technical cooperation activities that we hope would speed up the implementation of all the goals that are set up by our local partners. I'm thinking of the Ministry of Education, Culture and Research here. And we really hope that the international expertise, as well as the available research and the tools for assessment within this project, they will provide further strategic guidance for developing successful for future-oriented cooperation, collaboration, and open innovation process. And also creating strategic alliances and networks inside the country between businesses, NGOs, state institutions, but also then, as we said, regionally between Eastern Partnership countries. So just let me conclude by saying that I'm very glad that we can be a part here, and I would like to wish a successful work for the implementation team and in the continued work with this project that I really think could and will prepare the ground for many other projects. Thank you.
Mulțumim, Excelența dumneavoastră. Iar acum avem onoarea să-i oferim cuvântul domnului Anders Jansson. Dumnealui este șeful Direcției pentru dezvoltarea politicilor inovaționale în cadrul Comisiei Economice a Organizației Națiunilor Unite pentru Europa.
Thank you very much. Dear participants, Madam Ambassador, Madam State Secretary, Mr. Strachan, Director of the National Institute for Economic Research, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this event from the side of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And especially I'd like to extend warm congratulations to our counterparts who helped organize this on a relatively short notice. We were supposed to come here in June, but I understand there were some problems here in June and we had to cancel. But we were extremely keen to get Moldova on board, and it now seems that we have. So we're very, very happy. We're very, very happy about that. UNECE as an organization has worked with Moldova on several different issues, not on innovation in depth so far, but on issues like trade facilitation, on the different conventions that we have. So we have a very strong relationship with the government of Moldova, and I'm happy that we're now able to extend that relationship to the area that our committee is working on, which is the Committee on Innovation and Competitiveness and PPPs. Specifically, we're happy to be here because of the astonishing potential that we see in a country like Moldova. It starts, and I'd like to congratulate everyone here once again with the quick response to some of the recommendations that came out of a recent study by Horizon 2020 on the research and science policy institutions in Moldova already the year after you had passed several laws and now set up new institutions, which impressed me. This is often something that takes several years to reform, and it's very clear that there is momentum here to build on. So we would be very excited, and we will do what we can to contribute to this momentum. What's also remarkable about Moldova and also some of the other countries in the former Soviet Union is not only do you have the proximity and underused potential of doing business and interacting with EU and also the surrounding region. You also have very high levels of educational attainment in the population. So if you look at countries in the world and you correct for level of economic development, you are one of the best in the world in terms of educational attainment, and you should celebrate that and be proud of that. If you imagine that you would have to, when Botswana, for instance, a country that I work with, when they became independent, they had 5 university graduates among their citizens, and they all lived abroad. So you have a much firmer foundation to start with. You also have an institutional infrastructure that is already in place, but there are many things you don't have to build from scratch. We might have to think about how we can make those institutions work better, but at least they're there. There's a foundation there. And you also have a very strong tradition of research, sometimes of frontier research in several different areas. This is also something that many countries at this level of economic development would not have. So that's a potential that you can definitely use better, and we're very happy to see that some steps have been taken in that direction. Now, we're launching a project today, which consists of mini reviews of 6 countries, the 6 countries in the Eastern Partnership. And we're looking at innovation policies and institutions and processes. So we will be looking at innovation performance, things like IP registrations, high-tech exports, some of the metrics that you find in comparative indices like the Global Competitiveness Index and the Global Innovation Index. But our focus will be on what do policies look like, who formulates the policies, how are they implemented, how are they monitored and evaluated, how are you making sure that your public resources or your scarce public resources are used in the best possible way, or making sure that things are happening that might not otherwise happen in your economy. Because remember, innovation is about experimentation, it's about trying things out. Most things don't work, but when they do work, they can make an enormous difference. They can create completely new sectors of the economy and enormous opportunities that were not there before. And maybe attract some of the talent that unfortunately has left Moldova over the past couple of years to work abroad back here to Moldova, to create opportunities for them and to get the benefit from the talent that they have. So that's why we find it's important to see innovation policy as not only research and development policy. That's an important part, and especially potential strength in a country like Moldova, but also, of course, everything that has to do with supporting startups and the technoparks and the incubators, accelerators that you see, but also looking at the policies and institutions that support the private sector, SMEs, either by funding or through trainings. Because sometimes you'll find that with a little bit of coordination, with a little bit of tweaking, you can use those resources, which tend to be financially, in terms of the public budget, tend to be much higher than for some of the other areas, to support innovation through those instruments as well. Sometimes it's very, very easy. And also about FDI, foreign direct investment. Because remember, foreign direct investment is not as much about the capital as it is about the know-how, as it is about the ideas, as it is about bringing people in here who know to do something, who can try it out here in Moldova. So we're launching this sub-regional policy outlook today, and my colleague Jacob will talk more about that later. But another thing that we will do is to launch a national review, which will be an in-depth version of the analysis that we are starting now. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, and we need some input from you on to which extent this would be useful, when it would make sense time-wise, and what are some of the topics that you would like us to take an in-depth look at. So finally, and then after this review and after this IPO, which we will launch in a formal publication, we also want to do some in-depth national capacity building with you, where we pick one specific reform area, where our interventions and the expertise that we can bring to the table and the policy dialogue pilot platforms that we have could be useful and could make a difference to make sure that you get things right. Finally, I'd like to extend a warm thank you to the government of Sweden and Madam Ambassador who has provided the extra budgetary contribution necessary also to engage someone like Jacob here, who has worked with the SME policy index, which is similar to the IPO in some ways at the OECD, and some additional support, and of course the travel and some of the other expenses that are necessary. It would not be possible without you. Thank you very much, and thank you to the organizers, and I wish you all an interesting discussion, and we look forward to your feedback and ideas.
Mulțumim. Acum avem plăcerea să primim un cuvânt de bun venit domnul Stican, directorul Studiul Național pentru Cercetări Economice.
Dear Ms. State Secretary of our Ministry of Education, Culture and Research, dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to extend special thanks to our guests and to our organizers, because as I remember, our discussions began some 1.5 years ago. We were communicating with Jacob, and finally this is materialized in today's meeting, which is a very important event. And I'll tell you why. In general, the innovation management and the innovation nowadays tends to become probably the only mean by which a country tries to survive in a globalized and a highly competitive economy. Of course, this took place long ago, generated by the scientific and technical revolution, but along with the increase of the competition, the dimension of the innovation probably is revealed by many scientists, by many specialists, as being one of the most important for the development of a country. And there is a correlation, a statistical correlation already proved by the level of GDP, the value of the GDP, and the state of the research, development and innovation system in state, so in one country. This is why today's event is of a crucial importance, and the role of the state in supporting, managing and implementing innovation policies is probably imminent. It's imminent because all those countries who invested in education, research and innovation after the Second World War are nowadays present in all of the best rankings in terms of economic development, national competitiveness, and so on and so forth. For the first time in Moldova, as I remember, a small study, a small research was conducted by the National Bureau of Statistics during 2015 to 2016 on a short sample, about 3,000 enterprises, companies, and it was proven that only 21% of the companies were innovative companies. Were innovative companies, and out of these companies, 48% have developed innovations in industry, especially in manufacturing, and the rest of them in services. And also only few of them developed simultaneously several types of innovations regarding products, processes, or organization or marketing methods. Also this research proved and have shown that it is a very big problem. It is very problematic for managers to try to implement and to introduce innovations in their day-to-day activity. This is why I salute and I'm very happy with the launching of the sub-regional innovation policy outlook, which will allow us to compare the state of things in our 6 countries, in Eastern European countries as well as the Caucasus region. Speaking about the National Institute for Economic Research, I would like to mention that we could be involved and provide methodological assistance at this step, at this stage. Probably by the end we will be able to assess what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, and to find some solutions for increasing our innovation index in the Republic of Moldova. Once again, I would like to thank the organizers, and I'm very happy with that. I'm looking forward to today's discussions, and I'm very sure we'll have some productive exchange of opinions in this matter. And by the end, I think by the end we will have a good and important product. A study launched probably next year, including the Republic of Moldova in it. Thank you very much.
Vă mulțumim foarte mult. Și în vederea optimizării activității noastre și ca să cunoaștem pe cine avem o prezență în sală, vă rugăm să-mi prezentați scurt, indicând instituțiile pe care le reprezentați. Pe parte de dumneavoastră, evident, vă cunoaștem, dar ne face plăcere să-i cunoaștem pe toți. Vă rog, domnul Sedorin.
Dear colleagues, step by step, Moldova realized the program of integration in European area, in European knowledge society. And as the evidence of this process, we see that last decade it was organized 5 conferences with logo NANO. NANO, this is nanotechnology, nanoscience and nanotechnology. This is one of the most modern activity all over the world. And excuse me, let me introduce me. Professor Sidorenko, Director of Institute of Electronic Engineering and Nanotechnologies. And I am a coordinator of European project, Horizon 2020 program, twinning sub-program. In this project, our institute is coordinator, and 2 partners from Sweden, Stockholm University, Professor Krasnov, leader of the Swedish group, and from Netherlands, Professor Golubov is Twente University, leader of the development. It is one of the results of such integration in European scientific area. Many years we have experienced such collaboration, even before starting of this program, because more than 20 years we collaborate with Germany. I worked 12 years in Institute of Nanotechnology in Karlsruhe Research Center, and with the director of this research center we published 3 books devoted to nanotechnology. That's why we have good base, as your colleagues mentioned already, Moldova has good starting position for such extension of this collaboration. That's why this meeting is a very important new step in this direction, because this is you see that this process is not so visible like something which we see the building grows and we see, but such process slowly. That's why I appreciate this meeting, and I hope that it will give one more impulse for this process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry. I'm Svetlana Bozhakaru, the Vice President of Academy of Sciences of Moldova. I coordinate research in the domain of mathematics, computer science, chemistry, physics, and engineering sciences. I also would like to use the occasion, this occasion, to thank Swedish Academy for 10 years and maybe more support of our research in the domain of mathematics and computer science. Thank you.
So, good morning. My name is Nikolai. I represent the organization Farm and project coordinator under the European Union Youth and Agriculture.
Lucia Jurelu, Pro-Invest Consulting Agency, manager of the Horizon 2021 project.
Good morning, Sergio Borchescu, expert in civil society. what invigilator
Good morning, I'm a specialist in innovational projects in the Directorate, National Agency for Research and Development.
Good morning, Irina Shova, Department of Foreign Association.
Good morning, Irina Slivitsky, Agency for Investments Counselor. Olga Tretjakov, Ministry of Education, Culture and Research, Department of Policies in Research and Innovation. Numele este Ileana Civotari, reprezint Agenția Dezvoltare Regională Nord, specialist în politici regionale.
Eugen, Vice Rector for International Relations, University of Unce's Conference Commission.
Good morning, Ivo Koshukharu, Director of Information Society Development Unce's.
Good morning, Your Excellencies. Oksana Vladimir from the Organization for SME Sector Development, Business Support Infrastructure Division.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Igor Stavachenko. I'm from USA Moldova. I'm the Monitoring Innovation Specialist.
Good morning as well. Daniel Thompson, USAID, Director of the Economic Office.
Good morning, Natalia Solito, Expert in Innovation.
Good morning, Diana Rusa, Chamber of Commerce and Industry of the Republic of Moldova, Head of Direction for Business Environment, Support and Promotion.
Hello, my name is Tatiana Dumaka. I'm from Moldova State University. I'm Head of Division in Research and Innovation Institute.
Good morning, everyone. Liliana Miro from the State Agency for Intellectual Property, Head of Department.
Vă mulțumesc foarte mult și repetăm, nu am avut timpul pentru toți ca să fiți la masă, dar oricum ne-ar face plăcere să vă prezentați și să știm de ce instituție veniți.
Good morning, Olga Bukmar, Project Manager, Deal with Aviation and Development.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Mondora. I'm a coordinator of the organization for the
Присъжу главный директор инновативных innovation at the University of Slovenia is a field digital economy development and capacity building. Member of the working group of Eastern Partnership countries.
Good morning, I'm Laura Jumapov. Mulțumesc tuturor. Acum doresc să ofer cuvântul domnului Fexer. Dumnealui este ofițer pentru politici, pentru activități economice din cadrul același departament, pentru dezvoltarea politicilor inovaționale în cadrul Comisiei Europene.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. And I'd like to start by echoing what Anders said and thank our partners for the organization of our visit and also this roundtable today. I will give about 15 to 20 minute presentation about this new initiative, about the innovation policy outlook. I will talk a little bit about what some of the objectives are, what the timeline is, the different stakeholders involved, with the aim really of preparing all of you this upcoming initiative, because we hope that all of you will be involved in implementing it. So I have prepared a presentation. Go to the next slide with a number of objectives. I want to give a little bit more detail about what this project is about, what the objectives are. Then I will present really the structure, content, the assessment framework, and also the questionnaire which this outlook is based on. And then talk also about the timeline. What are some of the immediate next steps? What is there to be expected for stakeholders that are involved in the project? So, in a nutshell, the IPO, the Innovation Policy Outlook, is a new initiative. It's a pilot initiative. It's the first time that this type of topic is covered in this region. The implementing body is UNECE's Innovative Policies Development Section, which Anders is the head of, and essentially it will assess the scope and quality of not only innovation policy, but also the institutions behind the policies and the processes underlying these policies. Not only in Moldova, but also in the other Eastern Partnership countries. So Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Georgia, and Ukraine. The final output, the final formal output will be a UN publication that we plan to publish in the summer of 2020. But we believe and hope that this project, this process, goes much beyond a simple publication. If we go to the next slide, I've listed some of the underlying, maybe more important objectives. We hope that we will be able to identify and evaluate policy needs and priorities. This publication aims at including actionable policy recommendations, both at the national level and at the regional level, things in common, but also differences, so they can compare and learn from each other in the field of innovation. And given the transversal nature of innovation policy, we also hope that this process will foster ministerial and interagency cooperation. This roundtable will hope as a first step in this direction. And we hope that, given that this assessment is based on a questionnaire with scores that will be attributed to countries and a uniform methodology, we hope that this innovation policy outlook can also be used as a change management tool for governments in these 6 countries. And finally, we hope that it will also enable countries to communicate their priorities, communicate their needs, and potentially also act as a resource mobilization tool, also vis-a-vis donors. The innovation policy outlook is structured around 3 key pillars. This is a very simplified, let's say, structure, but given how many indicators and how many things we're looking at, I think it's useful for all of you. We look at policy governance, so the underlying policy framework that governs innovation, the coordination between different institutions, and also the complementarity with other government structures and strategies. So, for example, to what extent there's a sustainable development strategy in Moldova and how that synergizes with the innovation plan or innovation strategy or whatever you want to call it. We then also look at the different policy tools. What is the policy mix? So what are some of the successful policy measures that are being implemented in Moldova? And then we look at different types of policy measures. We look at measures that aim at knowledge absorption, at innovation promotion, at creating relationships and linkages between different innovation actors, knowledge diffusion, and also research and education. And finally, and this is in a way one of the more unique items of this project, we look at the policy processing. So how exactly were these policies conceived, prepared, designed, implemented, and are they being systematically monitored, evaluated after implementation? Some of the main aspects of the methodology, we have about 50 different indicators. We piloted these indicators, this questionnaire in Georgia. As I said, this is a new initiative, so we thought it was important to make sure it works in practice, so we spent quite a bit of time piloting and testing this methodology in Georgia. There will be a dual assessment, so one assessment will be led by the government, by partners of the Ministry of Education, Culture and Research. And there will also be what we call an independent assessment with the help of a local expert. We will then engage in what we call the consultation or reconciliation phase. We will come back to Moldova in November to present our first findings and also engage you once more in the discussions. And also, of course, given that this is a regional project, there are regular sub-regional meetings with all the countries at once. So we had one of these in March, there will be another one in December, and we plan to do another one in March next year. This is the timeline of the project in a nutshell. So there are basically 6 phases. We started with developing the methodology at the beginning of the year, with establishing political support in different countries, in the 6 countries, and also establishing operational focal points, extremely important for us to be able to implement the project. Then we piloted the methodology, as I said, in Georgia, and we're now in this light green phase, the assessment phase, where we've launched the assessment in all the other 5 countries. Today marks the combination, the end of this of the launching phase with the launch here in Moldova. And then, as I said, we'll come back to the countries to present first findings, to fill the remaining information gaps, and to also compare some of the discrepancies between the independent assessment that involves non-governmental experts and the government assessment, because we expect there to be some differences. We want to then engage stakeholders in a discussion to find, let's say, the situation on the ground. And then we will put all this together in a publication, and then launch the publication at a high-level meeting after the summer of 2020. Who do we see as some of the main stakeholders? Well, all of you that are here today will be involved in the assessment. As I said, the innovative policy section is the coordinating project team that is responsible for the implementation. We have national focal points in each of the countries. Here in Moldova, as you know, it is the Ministry of Education, Culture and Research, together with the National Institute for Economic Research. The different ministries, agencies, academies, and also foundations that shape innovation policy and implement innovation policy will be involved in the assessment, but also in elaborating and validating the recommendations. As Anders said, the Swedish government is, of course, an important partner. We make a point of meeting with them each time that we visit the countries. UNDP is our UN partners in each country, given that we, as UNECE, we don't have local offices. And of course, the private sector and a local consultant will be involved. What is the role of the national focal points? And this is something that we will discuss in a little bit more detail after the meeting with the Ministry and the Institute. First and foremost, I would say the most important task for us is to coordinate this assessment. So we've developed this questionnaire. It's comprehensive, but hopefully user-friendly, and it contains these 50 indicators with 5-6 questions for each of these indicators, and the Ministry nor the Institute will be able to give us answers to all these questions. So they will break this questionnaire up, send it to all of you institutions, collect the information, aggregate it into one questionnaire, and send it back to us. And this is, for us, of course, essential, because it's that information, it's that data that will shape our recommendations, that will shape our analysis. But the national focal points are also the primary point of contact. So when we discuss strategic project items, when we do the planning, when we discuss the methodology, the national focal points are involved in this process as well. And of course, whenever we visit the partner countries, they are our main contact point for helping us to organize roundtables and set up other meetings. A quick summary of what we've achieved in this project so far. So I joined UNECE at the beginning of the year to manage this project. So we established the project team within UNECE. We finalized the nomination of focal points in Moldova. This nomination occurred only 3 or 4 weeks ago, given the situation, the political situation before the summer. There were some changes in who we had as the focal point.
It's important with this type of project that is so transversal in the topics and also the stakeholders that it includes, to have high-level political support. And we just met with the minister before this meeting, and she was, I think, very positive and very much endorsing this initiative. Then we created, as I said, the assessment framework, so the scope of what we want to look at, then the questionnaire with its 250 questions approximately. And if we go to the next slide, we had the first meeting with all the national focal points together in March. We completed the pilot phase in Georgia, and we've now launched the project in all the 5 other countries, and today we're launching it here in Moldova. I just wanted to briefly recap again on the logic of this assessment process. Basically, there's these two assessments: the government self-assessment, the UNECE independent assessment with the help of a local consultant. Then we will consult on these two assessments, aggregate them into one, fill the final information gaps, conduct the analysis, and then draft the publication. A few words on those 3 pillars, and I will go into more depth in the final session of today's meeting, when I do a bit of a short training or a bit of capacity building on how to manage this questionnaire and what things to look out for. We have these 3 pillars. The first one is innovation governance, that looks at the overarching, let's say, strategic, institutional, and legal frameworks that shape innovation policy in the countries, and also look at the competence of the different government actors involved and how coordination works between the different actors that are involved. Then we look at the innovation policy tools. Next slide. So the policy mix, the various mechanisms and instruments of public support for innovation and support innovation demand and supply. And then finally, and this is the pillar that I'm, the third, we go to the next slide, that's the pillar that I'm involved in, particularly is we look at the innovation processes, so the underlying process that shapes innovation policy, but so we look at the details and even more importantly, the evidence of data-driven consequences in decision making and also the subsequent policy design and implementation. Here is a snapshot of what the final questionnaire looks like, and I will go into more detail later. For each of the 50 indicators, we have specific questions, then we provide multiple choice answers. The idea is to make this questionnaire as user-friendly and light touch as possible and as quickly as possible to answer, and also enable us to codify and compare the information between countries. Then we will ask for some evidence that supports the choice of the answer, additional comments if necessary, and for each of the indicators we have included instructions of who should be filling out this questionnaire, this particular question, how it should be filled out, and also a definition of the indicator itself to make sure that it's clear what we are talking about. As I said, the role of the national focal points in completing this questionnaire is extremely important. Go to the next slide, and one more. Just a few comments on the Georgia pilot exercise that occurred in between March and May. We tested the methodology. It took about 6 weeks for the Georgian government to fill out the questionnaire, and we incorporated the lessons learned into this final version that we are applying now to the other 5 countries. We wanted to see if the questions are clear, if the issues we cover are relevant, whether the timeline is realistic, workload is realistic, and also whether the selection of stakeholders is adequate. What have been some of the lessons of the pilot? I think overall it worked. The questionnaire was successful. That's the feedback we received from our partners in Georgia. It is very important to promote this project broadly, and this roundtable is the first important step into this direction. In Georgia, we also activated some of the diplomatic channels in Geneva to promote this project and the questionnaire. government sends us a first interim version of the questionnaire so that we can provide guidance on the quality of the answers and the suitability of the answers. 6 weeks was ambitious in Georgia. Here we are planning, in Moldova, planning 6 to 8 weeks for the completion of the questionnaire. It's important to be clear which stakeholder group is in charge of which section of the questionnaire, so this is something that we will define together with our partners in a meeting later on today. One feedback was that this independent assessment is very useful in giving an alternative picture of the innovation ecosystem, and therefore it was seen as useful complement to the government self-assessment. And of course, the dedication of the partner institutions is of course key. We have no doubt that in Moldova that this is the case based on the interactions and meetings we had over the last few days. We, as I said, we launched the project in 5 countries before the summer, and just finally a few words on go to the last slide. A few words on some of the next steps. Today we are launching officially the Innovation Policy Hub in Moldova. We would then suggest that this questionnaire is quickly circulated to the different stakeholders that will be involved. And as I said, we will have a more detailed discussion about who should be involved later on. If possible, we would request to receive the filled out questionnaire in mid or towards the end of October, and we plan to come back to Chisinau in the week of the 18th of November to have another similar roundtable to present some of the first findings, to fill remaining information gaps, and also to compare the assessment of our local consultant and that of the government. So that's the short-term timeline, and yeah, we look very much forward to working with all of you on this exciting new initiative. Thank you.
Pentru obiectivele de dezvoltare durabilă.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, we are asking Moldova not only to participate in this sub-regional mini analysis of your innovation system and your institutions, but we would also like to invite Moldova to do more in-depth review, a national review, using the methodology that we call innovation policy reviews for sustainable development, also of course with kind funding from the government of Sweden. We've had some preliminary discussions about this. One of the options that we are considering and that we would like to discuss with you is to start this process relatively soon after we finish the research process for the IPO. I think that's important because of course much of the information that we gather in that process will bring us already some of the way down to finish the actual review. Could we have the next slide, please? So we recently reformed the methodology of these reviews from what we used to call innovation performance review to innovation for sustainable development review. This is part of an overall process within the UN system to align all activities to the sustainable development goals that were agreed a couple of years ago. So it means that we will systematically be asking questions like how can innovation contribute to sustainable development, not only economic development, but also social inclusion and environmental sustainability. These are not necessarily contradictory objectives, because if you think about it, if you don't treat your environment well, your growth is not going to be sustainable. If you don't make the most out of your human capital and of human potential, you're not going to have sustainable growth either. So they're parallel, at least in the long term, but in the short term, of course, we need to be looking at some trade-offs. Innovation, for instance, means that you're trying out new activities and you're also sometimes getting rid of less productive activities, and then you need to make sure that there's a social safety net, that there are opportunities for retraining, so that people can adapt to the changing opportunities that are out there. So these aspects are important, and on the environmental side, of course, innovation, not necessarily innovation of something that's new to the world, but taking ideas that are already out there and using them and putting them into practice in Moldova will be essential to also moving towards environmental sustainability in the country, which I understand is a concern that is also relatively high on the political agenda. These reviews, we put them out at a rate of about one per year. We have reviewed already about 10 countries. We just finished reviews in Belarus, and recently, a couple of weeks ago, in Kyrgyzstan, and we're right now working on Georgia, and we want to do Moldova and Armenia next with some support from the government of Sweden. It's a process that goes through several steps. I'll explain them a little bit. We need, of course, a formal request for countries. What's very important to us is that the results of the review feed into your reform processes and your planning processes. For instance, the next edition of the 2013 to 2020 Innovation for Competitiveness Plan. It's important that what we do actually supports you in these efforts, and we have made sure to bring in some flexibility to look in particular depth at some of the issues that concern you and that you want to work on. We then have a formal, we engage both the expertise that we have in-house in our section, and for some of the more specific issues, such as for Georgia, we're working on public procurement, for instance. We're engaging leading international expertise. Then we have a peer review process where we invite policymakers both from your neighboring countries, from other ECE member states, and also some of the leading academics in the field to discuss and to validate the results and the recommendations. Next one. So I talked about this, so we can move to the next one. Next slide, please. So these reviews will give recommendations on stimulating innovation activity in the country, both in terms of enabling, so removing constraints, providing public inputs and infrastructure that needs to be in place, and especially in direct support to companies. Because remember, innovation is risky. It's one of the areas where direct support might be needed to make sure that things are happening that might not happen otherwise. And this, of course, first of all, it costs money, and it's dangerous because it can have effects that you are not intending. So getting the processes and the institutions right to make sure that you make as good and well-informed decisions as possible is very important. And finally, also to look at what we call the overall national innovation system, which is the different elements that need to be in place for vibrant innovation to take place in a country, from research to commercialization, not only new products, but also simply new ways of doing things, new ways of organizing businesses, organizing governments, organizing partnerships, maybe getting the private sector involved in some new areas like health and education. All of that is innovation. So some of the lessons that we've seen from these past reviews is, first of all, there's a need to think more clearly about what does innovation for development actually mean. it's been on the agenda at least among international organizations for quite a bit, but it's still relatively vague, and it's still something that needs to be carefully adapted to the local context. There are also a wealth of opportunities, leapfrogging, of course, to the latest technologies, knowledge diffusion from abroad. Many good ideas are already out there. Sometimes it's as easy as looking at those ideas and thinking about could they work in Moldova, and if you think they could, try them out. If it works, great, then you might see a whole new sector emerging. If it doesn't, it's still important to try, because then at least you know that's maybe not what you should focus on. Let's try something else. Let's take the resources and try for something else. There's of course the potential of engaging the diaspora. I think something like almost a third of the working age population in Moldova is working abroad. They can bring back not only capital but especially knowledge. They know the country. They have an emotional connection to the country. Many maybe want to return. This is an important resource, and I understand there's a section at the State Chancellery that is working on this. But there are still significant challenges, funding for R&D, and especially using research and development in a systematic fashion to see what results you can commercialize, and to see what are the problems out there in the private sector that maybe your research capacities could help resolve. There's of course also the brain drain, the loss of qualified research professionals, and I understand lately even teachers and doctors, which of course are very important, and of course also the transport and communications infrastructure. I will take the next one. So we will have 3 parts where we mainstream sustainable development. The first part will have about 1 to 3 chapters. We'll look at the general economic overview, what are the main challenges, the measures of diversification in the economy, of what we call the productivity gap between the most productive and least productive sectors, and then a chapter on innovation performance. We'll be looking at what we call innovation inputs, which are tertiary graduates, science and engineering graduates, some of the infrastructure, and outputs, which are things like technology content in export, level of sophistication of your export portfolio, and of course less important than in developed countries are things like IPR registrations, patent and trademark, and utility model registrations. It's still important, but remember, most of the innovation potential is taking things that are already out there. So patenting might not be essential for most of that. Then in part 2, we will review the national innovation system, including the institutions that are involved, their function, their mandate. We'll be looking at issues like one of the issues that came out of the Horizon 2020 report about separating different powers when it comes to funding for research and making decisions and monitoring the effects to make sure that the incentives are aligned, that there is a system there that works, and especially a system that is able to stop what is not working and continue scaling up what is working. That's very, very difficult to do, but it's important, especially because your public resources are important. And then in part 3, we want to do 2 to 3 in-depth chapters on specific issues where we engage leading experts in the field, and I'll give a few suggestions for what those could be. Next one. So we plan to start at the latest early next year with the mission where we explore further in depth the national innovation system, and then move on to phase 3 about September and November, where we do in-depth research and we consolidate the results, and we plan to do a peer review maybe in the beginning of the year after that, in 2021. And then after the launch, we also have budget, as I mentioned before, for 2 years of targeted capacity building to follow up on one or two of the recommendations that we made in the review. I'll skip this one. So we want to just float a couple of ideas on 2 or 3 topics that we could treat in depth in this review. And this is completely up to you. These are only a few reflections based on what we read in preparation for this mission. One might be industry or private sector science linkages, including looking at the incentives and the constraints that prevent the private sector and your research capacities and research institutions from working together and systematically exploring what could be commercialized and what not. We could think about sector-specific case studies and opportunities. For instance, there is something called business process outsourcing, which is basically people in Moldova doing some of the standard administration tasks that take place in companies on distance. There are many good examples of this. I've personally worked in the Philippines and I saw this sector flourish. Opportunities are immense, especially if you have a well-qualified workforce and relatively modest wage levels. Internationalization, especially using the diaspora to support the development of knowledge economy, and maybe some priority areas for public and private investment, and using public procurement for innovation. Remember, public procurement can be up to 20% of aggregate demand in the economy. It's enormously powerful. And Sweden, for instance, we are working with Vinnova on this, has had several very, very interesting reforms lately, where they do things like not say what kind of technology they want, not say what kind of materials they want. They say what they want to achieve. What are the goals? What is that needs to happen? And they give enormous flexibility for the private sector to come up with different solutions. And there you can see quite many interesting things coming up. And so public procurement can be an incredibly important lever if you use it correctly. And finally, private sector dynamics and the absorptive capacity of the private sector to systematically look for good ideas and to try them out. Thank you very much.
Mulțumim frumos. În continuare, vom avea o prezentare, sau mai bine zis, o instruire din partea domnului Texter și după care vom avea și o sesiune de întrebări, comentarii, facem o mică schimbare în agenda. Dacă acum sunt careva întrebări la prezentarea anterioară, pe care a făcut-o domnul Johnson, vă rugăm să le puneți acum, pentru că dumneavoastră are mică întâlnire bilaterală și va lipsi o scurtă perioadă de timp, după care va reveni. Dar, ca să nu vă pierdeți întrebările, puteți acum să le adresați. Da, vă rog.
I'm going to just ask about this and the third pillar, and the topics that might be in the third pillar. Will you determine the topics after you have the initial evaluation of the country? Which is the moment when you will decide in the pillar 3 the topics? Because you mentioned that you'll choose from industries and science linkages, sector-specific case studies, internationalization, public procurement. Will you determine the topics for the third pillar after you have an initial overview of the country, or it's done now with the initial things?
No, the topics, we don't, I mean, the UNECE typically does not decide on the topics. It's based on It's based, of course, on the capacities that we have internally and the experts that we know. But it's the country that we ask to decide, and we're not going to decide that yet. We're welcome to have any suggestions from you, and I think a few are already emerging from the discussions that we're having. But the time where we would make a final decision would be when we do the first review mission, which would be early next year.
Mulțumim. În continuare, mai sunt întrebări? Dacă nu sunt întrebări, vom trece la următoarea prezentare. Sau, dacă aveți întrebări și la domnul profesor acum, pentru că prima prezentare, la fel sunteți încurajați să-i adresați. Următoarea prezentare. Trecem deja la prezentare de către domnul profesor, după care probabil vom avea mai multe întrebări și comentarii.
Thank you very much. So this is the last part of our meeting today, and given the complexity and comprehensiveness of this questionnaire, and also complexity of the process, given that many of you will be involved, I just wanted to give a bit more detail of how this questionnaire is structured, who we see as some of the main respondents. So I've prepared a presentation just to read. I'll try to be relatively brief because we've loaded you with a lot of information, and also there's lunch waiting for us, and I think that will be an important opportunity to speak a little bit more informally. But anyways, I'll go through this presentation relatively quickly. Again, what are some of the main characteristics of this innovation policy outlook? It's based around, at the heart of it is really this questionnaire, and there are 50 indicators that cover these three pillars that I've mentioned. We've piloted this questionnaire successfully in Georgia, and we're now launching it today here in Moldova. Just to recap, on the next slide you can see the three pillars: innovation governance, and we have different team members in my project team that are responsible for each of these pillars, that are experts in the field and will join the next mission when we go into a little bit more detail. And each of these pillars is basically broken down into sub-pillars, so key topics that we want to cover. And then these sub-pillars are broken down into specific indicators. And we have about, as I said, 50 indicators. And then these indicators are broken down into specific questions that you will discover when you receive the questionnaire. And these questions are mainly multiple choice questions. Again, we want to make this easy for you. It's a comprehensive endeavor. It's as I said, a very transversal topic, innovation policy, and we want to make sure that for you they're easy to answer. We make it quite user-friendly. We can skip this next slide. So a few more words about innovation governance. Here we really look at the overarching strategies, institutional and legal frameworks that define innovation policy here in Moldova and the other countries. And we have two sub-pillars: the framework. So what are some of the main policy developments and strategic documents that underpin innovation policy? And we also map the innovation policy stakeholders. Then we also look at the coordination. Coordination is extremely important in the sphere of innovation, given, again, the transversal nature of the topic. And so we are mapping in this sub-pillar the different mechanisms and policy instruments for coordination of domestic but also international research, also at the sub-regional level. I'll quickly go through the different indicators that are included in the innovation governance pillar. If you go to the next slide. First one is the agenda setting. So really the top level strategy that defines overarching innovation. Here we look at who makes the decisions at the highest political level, and what are the long-term priorities in Moldova. And here we need a detailed description of these initiatives, and the responsible institutions here are less maybe the line ministries, but really the center of government specifically been developed for innovation. And here, the respondents should be the 9 ministries that have drafted this plan. So in this case, predominantly the Ministry of Education, Culture and Research. And we not only look at whether this plan exists, but also we examine its content and its implementation status. I know that although it was just adopted, so implementation is really in its infancy. Then we look at, as I mentioned earlier, the complementarities between the different national strategies. So is there a sustainable development strategy? For us at the UN, of course, that should be a priority for each of the member countries. But is this strategy complementary with the innovation strategy? So are they complementary, or are there is there some paradox between the way that they are structured and implemented? Then we look at the institutional framework. So what are the roles of the different agencies involved in science and innovation policy implementation? Are there overlaps, the duplication, what are the responsibilities? Here again, is an indicator that will have to be answered by a number of actors that are involved. Then we look at the legal framework. So what are the gaps and challenges of the national legal frameworks? What are the main regulations steering the development of research and innovation in specific areas? We look at the different laws, intellectual property, that define intellectual property, for example. But again, this will be something that we'll have to include different stakeholders to answer. In the next slide, you see a more detailed example of an indicator. So we have the indicator on the coordination. And here we look at 3 different aspects of coordination. We look at international cooperation and coordination. We look at the coordination of the central government. Is there some kind of innovation council, some kind of other mechanism that coordinates the activities of different institutions? And we also look at subnational, go to the next slide, subnational coordination. If you go to the next slide, yeah. So to what extent subnational government units are involved in the implementation of innovation policy. So here the Ministry of Regional Development or equivalent would be involved in answering this one. So that's, and then here you see a precise question as it features in the questionnaire. So we have the name of the indicator, the specific question, predefined answers, often they're just yes or no. We want to, again, they're defined in a way that they're easy to answer. And then we ask you to provide us links, evidence, and some comments, and we have, as you see, a definition for each of the indicators at the bottom. Then we get to the second pillar that a colleague of mine is an expert in. Look at the policy mix, what are the different measures that are being put in place. And here we have a lot of indicators, 29, to look at a lot of different areas of government activity, knowledge absorption, innovation, promotion, relationships and linkages, and research and education. And so the way we assess this pillar is a little bit more, let's say, simplistic. We just look at all the different measures. We go to the next slide and see to what extent this measure exists or has been piloted. Then in the next slide, we look at the next level, to what extent there's a policy framework in place for this measure, to what extent implementation has started, and then we look at the actual implementation. So within the given measure, what is the extent of its implementation, advanced, what are the monitoring and evaluation practices attached to this measure, and is its impact being measured in the medium term. And then we also have the opportunity to give, if we go to the next slide, some more comprehensive answers in open questions that are accommodated. Anyway, it all sounds a little bit complicated in the presentation. I apologize. I tried to make it simple. When you get the questionnaire, you will see it's quite self-explanatory. We try to make it light touch. We try to make it user-friendly, and hopefully you'll be able to help us answer questions. And then the final pillar, if you jump 2 slides, is about innovation processes. So here we look at the underlying processes that and also the Ministry of Education, Culture and Research to choose one specific innovation policy measure that will be examined under this third pillar. So we cannot look at innovation policy goals across all the different actors and all the different policies that are relevant, but we will ask them to choose one representative recently implemented policy measure, and we will examine exactly how this policy measure was conceived, how it was designed, how it was implemented. So this is something that remains to be discussed. And so in this third pillar, if you go one more, we look at the preparation of this specific policy measure. Was there a sound economic rationale for attributing public funds to its implementation? Was there a market failure analysis that was conducted? How was it designed? Is there an action plan? Who made the decision? That's the next slide. And then if we go one more slide down, was the private sector consulted? Of course, that's important in the sphere of innovation. To what extent? And we had already a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, and we got some very good first impressions of the existence of some mechanisms to involve the private sector systematically in policy making. And then coherence. To what extent is this policy measure coherent with the activities of other government bodies and institutions, but also other strategic documents? It goes back to what I said initially. To what extent are the objectives of this policy measure that has to be chosen? To what extent are they coherent with the overall objectives of the innovation strategy? And then finally, we look at the implementation. So to what extent has this policy measure being amended during its implementation based on lessons learned, and to what extent is it being reviewed against its action plan? And then post-implementation, the final part, to what extent is there, or will there be an ex-post evaluation? And to what extent is the policy measure, will future policy measures be adapted accordingly? So that's just an overview of, I know that this was quite dry and technical and quite rich in information, but we will circulate this presentation, and when you are receiving the questionnaire from our partners, you can go back to this presentation for further guidance, and you can also always contact me as the project manager to give guidance on how to fill out the questionnaire, what information to include, maybe what colleagues to consult, how to present the information. And of course, the more detail you provide, the better. We try to capture all the different aspects of that questionnaire, but there may be some of your activities that may not be captured by a specific indicator, and we want to hear about them. As I said, if you encounter problems, feel free to contact me. We're very, I think, quick in responding, because we understand that you are spending your valuable time on helping this project, and we want to make sure that we're there, so that you spend this time efficiently. And then we hope that this questionnaire and this analysis will lead to support subsequent reforms in the area of innovation policy, and contribute to the final publication. So thank you very much for your attention. It was a busy and rich morning, and you were really, I think, loaded with a lot of information. I can assure you that when you see the questionnaire, everything is more self-explanatory, and more light touch. And we're a bit early, which is good, and we have more time to discuss over lunch. And we very much hope that you will contribute to our endeavor, to our new initiative, and that in the summer next year we can all gather to have a valuable publication with valuable recommendations.
Mulțumim frumos pentru prezentare. Acum deschidem o portiță pentru comentarii, întrebări și încurajăm să fiți cât mai minuțioși în acest sens, dacă odată după prezentare. Mulțumim că avem reprezentările acestui chestionar, va depinde și recomandările pe care le vom recepționa din partea partenerilor, ori avem recomandări, avem nevoie de astfel de recomandări și de ce ne folosim astăzi de această ocazie. Deci până noiembrie mai este, dar până atunci trebuie să avem și niște rezultate, deja când ne întâlnim la următoarea ședință. Vă rog.
I'm representing the Ecological Office, so we're supposed to try to do and the research education and so on. My question refers to indicators you are using, so the technology you are using for question, for example, knowledge absorption and data base. Have you adjusted one with the terminology that is already well mentioned knowledge absorption in your questionnaire as it is presented by the innovation impact of the competitiveness in this review. So how you work with when you establish these indicators?
It's a very relevant question. So, with regards to these other international benchmarking studies, now they are a little bit different because they look at, let's say, the quantitative side of things, right? The inputs and the outputs. What we really look at is the policy side. So the extent to which relevant policies in this field have been designed, implemented, and then also evaluated. But in terms of the overall logic and definitions, yes, they are quite in line with the work of WIPO, for example. We coordinate with them quite closely. Their office is actually just across the road in Geneva. We will also have in this final report a chapter that looks at the innovation performance of countries. And there, I'm not going to hide from you that we rely quite heavily on exactly these data points from WIPO that follow quite closely actually the logic that we have here on the policy side with regards to knowledge diffusion, knowledge adoption, etc.
Next. So this means everything is clear. Well, nothing is clear.
It would be probably a good idea to circulate and to share both presentations among the members of the participants. Yeah, and in this way we would be able to share it in our each of one in our staff, so people would be better involved in what you have presented today. And my question actually is very short. That this questionnaire has a common template for all the countries, or you adjust it depending on some local? No, it's the same. So the same frame. Okay.
So, when you do a regional exercise, of course, there's a trade-off between the country specificities and then the comparability between countries. And we have these innovation reviews that really are that Anders presented, that look in depth at really the one country only and the specificities of that country. The underlying objective of my project is to benchmark the performance of these 6 countries against each other. So there we opted to using one uniform questionnaire across the 6 countries. But that questionnaire was shared with the countries when we drafted it back in March, and there were some comments about how it should be adjusted more to certain countries' circumstance, and in the end we found a compromise where we included indicators that are mostly relevant for all the countries, and then in some cases, specific. For example, the indicator that I mentioned about, sub-regional innovation governance. Of course, that's maybe less relevant in a smaller country like Moldova than it is in a country like Ukraine. So we covered that aspect a little bit, let's say marginally. So it is included, but it's not one of the main focuses of the questionnaire. So in conclusion, yeah, we tried to have something that fits all the countries well. It's not perfect, of course. Again, each country has its specificities, but the overarching objective is to compare and learn from each other. So it was important that we had one uniform questionnaire. And maybe we should have circulated the questionnaire before this meeting. In retrospect, that would have made sense, and you would have already seen it. But it would have maybe also been overwhelming to see the questionnaire without any context. So you'll receive it, this week right away, so that then you can already familiarize yourself with it.
Thank you. Any other question? In the context of the questionnaire, we have a favor to ask to all of you, because maybe we do not have the representatives of all organizations that could be included in the list of participants. So when you receive the questionnaire from us, from our partners, please share this questionnaire with all other representatives or institutions that could be of value and that could benefit from the recommendations after the study. We really encourage you, and then you can even send us the list of institutions you consider we need the opinion and to answer to this questionnaire. Thank you. Maybe some comments, maybe some opinion about this first step toward the study. It is also very important for us and for our partners to know what do you think about this exercise, and which are maybe your expectations after the study.
I just would like to highlight that this could be an additional tool for us to assess the situation in the country, because looking at different rankings, we have different results sometimes. If we look in the World Competitiveness Reports of the position, the ranking of Moldova in terms of innovation is one of the lowest in the world, and when we look in the global index of innovation, our ranking is not so bad actually comparing to other countries, and this could be an additional tool telling us what would be the real situation in the country, and of course to assess more explicitly in more details the real state of things. That is why I also encourage all of us to be active and to try to give the best, because the best answers, because when filling in a question is a very difficult thing. It's not so easy. If you fill it correctly, you answer the questions correctly, so the results are all the so-called weighted quality. If not, so you'll get just some simple results which would tell you nothing.
Be filled in, yeah. And Mr. Statan is very right when speaking about these differences ranking in different index evaluators, and of course our country, in the sense of the reform in the research and innovation sector, needs a lot very correct information, and it shouldn't be an information that we need or we would like to have. We need the information that will show the real situation in order even to update our national program for the innovation actions. If you had time to see this document, we tried to put to focus on the importance of innovation policy. But this is the right moment when we can improve it and when we can make it better. So, if you do not have any other questions, comments, or maybe you can have comments, but we can share them during our lunch. You are invited to our lunch. That is also an opportunity to talk about this and to have an exchange of opinions. Thank you, and we really appreciate your availability in a very short time to get ready to come to this meeting. We hope we will meet not only one or two times, we will meet every time we will need in order to finish this study, and we will then meet for join for the results of this study. Thank you so much.